the soup that saved a family. Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to another journey through time and the deepest human emotions. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that happened more than 140 years ago in the Paraíba Valley of São Paulo, where the aroma of coffee mixed with tears of pain and hope. A narrative about how a simple dish, a humble soup, can carry the power to heal not only the body, but also the shattered soul of an entire family. This is the story of Rosa dos Santos, a young woman who arrived as a cook and departed as a blessing, leaving a legacy that echoes to this day in the hearts of those who believe in the transformative power of true love. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing that our story is reaching different corners of our world. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave that special like. It helps me so much to continue bringing these moving stories to you. Year 1881, Paraíba Valley, interior of São Paulo, near the city of Taubaté, in a region where coffee plantations stretched like green seas under the infinite sky. The colonial mansion of Santa Clara Plantation breathed death, though no one else had, departed for the other world. The adobe walls, which once witnessed crystalline laughter and animated conversations around the jacaranda table, now held only the muffled echo of hesitant footsteps and contained sighs. Francisco Silva walked through the corridors like a ghost of himself, his 38 years weighing like centuries on the broad shoulders that once carried coffee sacks with the strength of a bull. His thick beard, always well trimmed before, grew carelessly, mirroring the internal chaos that consumed his soul. Clara had departed 15 days ago. Yellow fever took her in just 4 nights of agony, leaving behind the scent of roses that still permeated the linen curtains and the longing that had settled into the furniture, like an unwanted guest. Francisco had tried everything. 3 doctors came from Taubaté. A local healer blessed the entire house with rue and guinea grass. He himself had promised St. Benedict a new chapel if his wife were spared. But not even all the prayers in the world could keep Clara in this plane, and now their son was wasting away like a candle near its end. João, 8 years old, hadn't touched food for exactly 15 days. Nothing, not even water, could stay in his small, revolted stomach. The boy who ran through the coffee fields like a wild colt had transformed into a skeletal creature with sunken eyes that constantly searched for the maternal figure who would never return. Donna Maria, Francisco's mother, tried everything her 58 years of experience allowed: warm chicken broth, cornmeal porridge with milk, even pure honey straight from the hive. João looked at everything with the same mortal disinterest, turned his face to the wall and always murmured the same words, "I want my mama." On the 15th night, when the waning moon hid behind rain-heavy clouds, João began to delirious. Francisco remained seated beside the Santo wood double bed where he had placed his son, watching as fever consumed the already so fragile little body. "Mama, Mama, are you there?" João babbled, his glassy eyes staring at something only he could see. "Why don't you come get me? I'm waiting." Francisco clenched his fists until his nails dug into his palms. Desperation rose through his throat like bitter bile. He was losing his wife and son in the same month. The coffee empire he had built with blood and sweat was worthless now. What good was owning 3,000 coffee plants, prize-winning Nilor cattle, and the admiration of all the plantation owners in the region if he couldn't save what really mattered? Would some greater force hear his pleas before it was too late? The January rain drummed on the French tile roof when Donna Maria descended the hardwood stairs with resolute steps, a strange determination shining in her dark eyes. Francisco lifted his head from the kitchen table, where he had remained for hours staring at a cup of cold coffee, trying to find answers in the bottom of the imported porcelain. "Son," she said, her voice carrying that silent authority that only matriarchs know how to exercise. "I need to talk to you about a solution." Francisco raised his tired gaze. Donna Maria never spoke just to speak. When she used that tone, it meant she had made a decision, regardless of anyone else's opinion. "I know a girl, Rosa dos Santos. Good cook, has a way with children. Lost her father early, supports her sick mother by making sweets to sell at church. She could—" "Santos?" Francisco interrupted, the word escaping like a curse. His eyes narrowed until they became dangerous slits. "What Santos, mother?" "Rosa dos Santos, daughter of the late Sebastião." Francisco stood up with such violence that the chair toppled backward with a crash. The irregular scar that cut across his back, a perpetual reminder of the overseer's whip, seemed to catch fire under his linen shirt. "Sebastião dos Santos," he roared, making the dishes tremble on the shelves. "That demon who whipped me like an animal, who stole my wages when I was nothing but a miserable tenant, who accused me of stealing a chicken I never saw in my life and made me spend 2 months in Taubaté jail." The memories returned like a flood. Young Francisco, 19 years old, working from sun to sun on the neighboring plantation for miserable pennies. Sebastião dos Santos, cruel and thieving overseer, who took advantage of his position to humiliate and rob the tenants. The day Francisco dared to complain about late wages and was tied to the post like a slave, whipped until his back opened in wounds. The false accusation that took him to jail, where he spent 60 days eating sour cornmeal mush and sleeping on the dirt floor. "Never," Francisco continued, fists clenched. "I'd rather see my son. I'd rather that—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The idea of losing João was too unbearable to be verbalized. Donna Maria waited for the storm to pass. She knew her son like the palm of her hand. She knew the pain he carried on his back and in his soul. But she also knew that some wounds need to be opened so they can finally heal. "Sebastião died 3 years ago," she said gently. "The daughter bears no guilt for her father's sins, and if there's a chance to save João—" "Don't discuss this with me anymore." Francisco left the kitchen with heavy steps, leaving the echo of his rage reverberating through the walls. But Donna Maria was not a woman to give up easily. At dawn, she saddled the gentle mare and set off toward the adobe shack, where Rosa dos Santos lived with her tubercular mother, in the poorest part of the region. She knew Francisco would never forgive the disobedience, but some risks are worth a child's soul. Could it be possible that the daughter of the man Francisco hated most was precisely the salvation they so desperately needed? Rosa dos Santos stepped on the threshold of the mansion's back door at the exact moment when the first rays of sun crossed through the jacaranda treetops. Her hands, calloused from hard work, trembled slightly as she held a small bundle with her few belongings: 2 cotton skirts, a raw linen blouse, the wooden rosary that had been her grandmother's, and the little notebook where she wrote down her recipes. Donna Maria guided her through the silent corridors, whispering instructions about the house routine and mainly about João's condition. Rosa listened to everything attentively, but her clear eyes, an inheritance that betrayed her origin, captured every detail of the environment: the closed curtains, the smell of sadness impregnated in the furniture, the heavy silence like mourning. When they reached the room where João lay, Rosa felt her heart tighten in her chest. The boy was almost transparent, skin stretched over delicate bones like tissue paper over wire. His blonde hair, surely once full of life, was now dull and stuck to his sweaty scalp. He slept restlessly, murmuring scattered words in fever delirium. "My God," Rosa whispered, slowly approaching the bed. Donna Maria left discreetly, leaving them alone. Rosa sat in the chair beside the bed and instinctively extended her hand to touch the boy's forehead. João opened his eyes, large, green like Francisco's, but lifeless, like dry wells. "Who are you, ma'am?" he murmured in a weak voice. "My name is Rosa," she said, her voice soft as velvet. "I came to take care of you." João stared at her for long seconds before turning his face to the wall. "I don't want food. I just want my mama." Rosa felt something move inside her chest, an old familiar pain. She knew exactly what that sensation of emptiness was, that desperate need for something that would never return. "When I was your age," she began, her voice low and melodious, "my father died in an accident with the bulls. I also stopped eating. I thought if I got very thin, he would come back to get me and take me with him." João turned his head slightly, a tiny spark of curiosity shining in his gaze. "And what happened?" "I got so weak that one day I fainted in the garden. When I woke up, my mother was crying and told me something I never forgot. 'Rosa, your father wouldn't be happy if he knew you were hurting yourself because of him. He wants you to grow strong to honor his memory.'" Rosa stood up slowly and smoothed João's hair with infinite tenderness. "Your mama also wants you to grow strong. I'm sure of it." For the first time in 15 days, João didn't say he wanted to die. Rosa went down to the kitchen and lit the wood stove. Her hands worked with precision learned from necessity. She chose a plump free-range hen, killed and cleaned it with respect, like someone performing a sacred ceremony. She sautéed it with onion and garlic just enough, added clean well water, and let it simmer slowly. While cooking, she hummed softly a song her mother sang on difficult days. The aroma began to spread through the house, carrying with it something that had been lost long ago, the feeling of home. When the soup was ready, Rosa went up to the room with a simple tray. Clay bowl, wooden spoon, a glass of fresh water. Joan was awake, staring at the ceiling. "I brought something special," she said, sitting again beside the bed. "A soup made with lots of love." "I can't eat," Joan murmured. "I know. But how about we try together? One small spoonful. If you can't swallow it, that's okay." With infinite patience, Rosa brought the first spoonful to Joan's lips. He hesitated, then slowly opened his mouth. The warm broth went down his parched throat like a blessing. "One more?" Joan nodded. Spoonful after spoonful, like someone building hope grain by grain, Rosa fed the boy. And for the first time in 15 days, Joan didn't vomit. When Francisco arrived from the coffee fields at evening, he stopped dead at the kitchen entrance. A lullaby floated through the air, accompanied by the smell of soup and the unmistakable sound of a child laughing. Could it be possible that his greatest enemy's daughter carried within her the miracle he had been begging heaven for? Francisco climbed the stairs with his heart beating like a Festa Junina drum. The sound of Joan's laughter, that crystalline giggle he hadn't heard for almost a month, echoed through the corridors like celestial music. When he reached the bedroom door, the scene that revealed itself before his eyes almost made him collapse. Joan was sitting up in bed, supported by pillows with more color in his face than he'd had in weeks. And beside him, a young woman held an improvised book made of brown paper sheets, telling a story with theatrical gestures that drew laughter from the boy. And then Sassy Perere said to Curupira, "Buddy, your feet are backwards, but your heart is in the right place." Joan laughed so hard he started coughing, but it was a different cough, no longer the sickly rattle of recent days, but the clearing of someone who laughs too much and needs to catch their breath. It was then that Rosa turned her face toward the door, and Francisco saw her eyes. Green, clear, just like Sebastião dos Santos's. Rage rose through his throat like volcanic lava. Francisco clenched his fists and advanced into the room. "What is this person doing in my house?" he roared, making Joan shrink in fear. Rosa stood up slowly, unhurried, with a serene dignity that disconcerted Francisco. She didn't lower her head, didn't step back. She just looked at him with those impossible eyes, so much like her father's, but carrying a completely different light. "My name is Rosa dos Santos," she said with a firm voice but without arrogance. "Your mother hired me to take care of Juan." "Santos!" Francisco spat the word like poison. "I know that surname very well. I know the breed you come from. Shameless, liar, just like your father." "Francisco!" Donna Maria's voice cut through the air like a whip. The matriarch appeared at the door with a terrible expression on her face. "Enough! Mother, you don't know what you're doing." This girl, Donna Maria interrupted, pointing at Rosa, accomplished in one day what 3 doctors couldn't do in weeks. "Look at your son." Francisco looked. Joan was pale again, but not from illness, from fright. He held Rosa's hand tightly, as if she were the only anchor preventing him from being dragged back to the abyss. "Papa," Joan whispered with a trembling voice, "Rosa told me beautiful stories, and I ate all the soup." The empty bowl on the tray was like a punch to Francisco's stomach. 15 days trying to get his son to eat, 15 days of desperation, and a stranger had managed in a few hours. "I don't care," Francisco said, but his voice lost some of its force. "She's leaving now." Rosa nodded serenely and began to arrange the improvised book. "No!" Joan shouted, clinging to her skirt. "She can't leave. She promised she'd teach me to make pachoca and tell more stories." Francisco looked at his son, his boy who had spent 15 days on the brink of death, and something broke inside him. Donna Maria approached and whispered in his ear, "The father's sins are not the daughter's sins." The phrase echoed in Francisco's mind as he watched Rosa caress Joan's hair with genuine tenderness. There was something about her, a goodness that showed in every gesture, that didn't match at all the memories he held of the Santos family. "All right," he finally said, the words coming out as if each one weighed 100 weight. "You can stay, but," he raised his index finger, "keep your distance. Do your work and nothing more. And if I suspect anything—" Rosa nodded again, showing neither fear nor resentment. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said simply. When Francisco left the room, his legs trembled as if he had carried coffee sacks all day. Downstairs, he served himself a double shot of cachaça and stood watching the rain that was beginning to fall over the coffee fields. Sebastião dos Santos, the name that haunted his nightmares. And now that man's daughter was sleeping under his roof, caring for his son. Could it be possible that destiny played tricks so cruel or so merciful? 2 weeks passed like pages turned by careful hands. Santa Clara Plantation slowly awakened from its mourning, like a flower that opens its petals again after a harsh frost. Rosa had settled into the old slave quarters, now arranged by Donna Maria with clean curtains and a comfortable cot, and established a routine that worked like medicine for the entire house. João woke to the rooster's crow and the aroma of cornbread coming from the oven. Rosa taught him to wash his face in the china basin, to comb his hair with the wooden comb, and to say his morning prayers before the shrine of Santa Clara that Donna Maria had installed in the room. "Dear Lord," João murmured with hands in prayer, "thank you for Rosa coming to take care of me. And give Mama a kiss for me." Francisco, who always passed through the corridor at that time pretending to review plantation papers, felt a tightness in his chest every time he heard his son's prayer. João was growing again, not just recovering the lost weight, but developing a gentle maturity he hadn't possessed before. During the mornings, after coffee with milk and cornmeal cake, Rosa took João to the yard. She taught him to tend the herb garden, to recognize medicinal plants, to distinguish bird songs. The boy, who before was only interested in games, now listened attentively when Rosa explained that mint served to calm the stomach and that basil kept ants away. "How do you know all these things?" João asked one morning, while helping Rosa water the okra plants. "My mother taught me, and her mother taught her." Women's knowledge passes from mother to daughter, like a blessed inheritance. João became thoughtful. "Will Rosa teach me these things even though I'm a boy?" Rosa smiled, a smile that illuminated her entire face. "Of course. Wisdom has no gender, João. It has usefulness." In the afternoon after lunch, always hearty and tasty since Rosa had taken over the kitchen, she taught João to read and write. Seated on the back porch, with the improvised notebook and charcoal for writing, Rosa showed him the letters one by one, with infinite patience. "Now let's write an important word," she said, one February afternoon. M-O-T-H-E-R. João drew the letters carefully, tongue sticking out in concentration. When he finished, he held up the paper proudly. "Mother," he read slowly. "Rosa, can my mother see when I write her name?" "I'm sure she can," Rosa replied, smoothing the boy's hair. "Mothers have a special way of always being near, even when we can't see them." Francisco, who was passing just then carrying the account books to check coffee production, stopped short upon hearing the conversation. He hid behind the porch column and observed the scene. His son, who could barely hold a spoon a month ago, now wrote words and smiled as if the world were a good place again. And Rosa was nothing like what he expected from Sebastião dos Santos's daughter. There wasn't a single gesture of malice, of self-interest, of falseness. She treated João with genuine affection, cared for the house as if it were her own, respected Donna Maria with filial deference. That night, during dinner, the first where Francisco sat at the table with Rosa and João, he broke the uncomfortable silence he had been maintaining. "The boy is different," he said, addressing Rosa without looking at her directly. "Better. João is a special child," Rosa replied simply. "He just needed a little affection and attention." Francisco slowly chewed the chicken stew with okra, savoring not only the perfect seasonings, but something he couldn't define. The house seemed more alive, as if Rosa brought with her an energy that made plants grow better, food taste better, laughter echo with more force. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" he asked, surprising himself with his own curiosity. "From my mother, and from necessity," Rosa smiled sadly. "When you have little, you learn to make a lot with almost nothing." Francisco nodded. He knew that lesson well. After dinner, Rosa took João for a bath in the zinc tub, taught him to brush his teeth with fine salt, and put him to bed with a story about a prince who traveled the world searching for the secret of happiness. Francisco stayed on the porch, smoking his straw cigarette and listening to Rosa's melodious voice floating through the open window. For the first time in months, the plantation seemed at peace. Could it be possible that his prejudices were blinding him to a truth much simpler and more beautiful? The Feast of St. John of 1881 approached like a promise of joy in the June skies. Santa Clara Plantation awakened to preparations it hadn't seen in a long time. Rosa and Donna Maria spent their days making sweets, decorating the house with colorful paper flags, and preparing the bonfire that would be lit in the yard. João ran through the house like a wild colt, helping with everything he could and inventing extra tasks just to stay near Rosa. The boy had recovered not only his health, but a vitality that surprised everyone. His hair shone golden in the sun again, His cheeks gained rosy color, and the smile never left his face. "Rosa," João said one morning, while helping to peel sweet potatoes for the festival, "can I ask a question?" "You can," she replied, her skillful hands cutting the orange flesh into uniform slices. "Are you going to stay here at the plantation forever?" The question was simple, but carried a weight that Rosa felt in her chest like a hot stone. She stopped cutting and looked at João, that boy who had become as precious to her as a child of her own blood. "Why do you ask that?" "Because I like you very much, and I'm afraid you'll go away like my mama." Rosa put down the knife and hugged João tenderly. The boy snuggled into her lap like a little bird seeking protection. "João, your heart is very big for an 8-year-old boy. But I want you to know one thing. As long as you need me, as long as I can take care of you, I'll be here. Promise?" "I promise." What Rosa didn't say was that her staying at the plantation depended on much more than her wishes. It depended on Francisco. And Francisco was fighting against something that was growing in his chest like coffee in the rainy season. In recent weeks, he found himself watching Rosa discreetly, the graceful way she moved through the kitchen, her infinite patience with João, the respectful manner in which she treated Donna Maria. There was a light in her that seemed to illuminate all the dark corners of the house. But the shadow of the Santos surname still weighed over them, the memories of humiliations, beatings, days in jail. How could he love the daughter of the man who had caused him so much suffering? On the eve of St. John's, while Rosa prepared pachoca and pain de molek for the festival, Francisco decided to face his demons. He found her alone in the kitchen, humming softly while stirring the brown sugar candy in the copper pot. "Rosa," he said, his voice coming out hoarser than intended. She turned, a bit of peanut flour sprinkled on her blue apron. "Yes, Señor Francisco. I need to talk to you about your father." The smile faded from Rosa's face. She turned off the fire and faced him completely, her hands joined in front of her body in a posture of serene dignity. "I know who my father was," she said with a firm voice. "I know the things he did, and I know why you sometimes look at me as if I were a ghost from the past." Francisco was surprised by her frankness. "Then you know I have reasons to—" "You do," Rosa interrupted, "but I am not my father. I was born with his surname, but I didn't inherit his soul." Francisco remained silent, studying that face that carried familiar features, but a completely different expression from the one he had known. "Sebastião dos Santos taught me what I didn't want to be," Rosa continued. "He taught me that cruelty generates only pain, that those who plant hatred reap solitude. When he died, I buried with him all the evil he carried. What remained was just Rosa. Only Rosa." The simplicity of those words hit Francisco like lightning. For months he had tried to see Sebastião in Rosa, looking for traces of evil, signs of falseness. But Rosa was just Rosa, a good woman who cared for his son with genuine love and had transformed his house into a home again. "Why did you stay here?" Francisco asked, his voice lower. "Why didn't you leave when you saw how I treated you?" Rosa smiled, a sad smile, but full of understanding. "Because João needed me. And maybe you did too. Could it be possible that true love was stronger than the wounds of the past?" The St. John's bonfire crackled in the plantation yard like a giant heart pulsing orange light in the June darkness. The aroma of roasted corn, sweet potato and spiced punch filled the air, mixing with the sound of guitar and accordion that echoed through the hills. João slept deeply in Rosa's lap, exhausted from dancing so much quadrilla and eating pachoca. Francisco watched the scene from the porch, a mug of punch in his hands, and his heart heavy with feelings he didn't know how to name. The plantation workers, the neighbors who came to the festival, all treated Rosa with genuine affection and respect. She had won everyone's sympathy, not with words but with gestures, a home remedy for Joaquim's sick daughter, reading lessons for the workers' children, always an extra plate at the table for whoever arrived hungry. "Beautiful festival," commented Donna Maria, approaching with her wool shawl over her shoulders. "Rosa organized everything," Francisco replied, not taking his eyes off her. "Even the sweet recipes." "That girl is a blessing," sighed Donna Maria. "Look how different João is. How different the house is." Francisco nodded. It was true. In the 4 months since Rosa arrived, Santa Clara Plantation had been reborn like a tree after the dry season. There was laughter in the corridors, delicious aromas in the kitchen, life pulsing in every room. "Mother," Francisco said quietly, "I think that you're in love with her?" Donna Maria completed with a knowing smile. Francisco almost dropped his mug. "How did you—" "Son, I didn't raise you to be a fool." For weeks you've been different. Less grumpy, more attentive to what happens in the house, and your excuses to pass through the kitchen are getting more and more creative." Francisco blushed like a boy caught misbehaving. It was true. In recent weeks, he had invented reasons to talk with Rosa. Questions about household expenses, suggestions for the menu, requests for opinions about Joaum's education. Anything to spend a few minutes near her, observing her delicate gestures, listening to her melodious voice. "And what if I really am in love?" he murmured. "She's the daughter of Sebastião dos Santos, I know," Donna Maria interrupted. "But she's also the woman who saved your son, the woman who brought joy back to this house, the woman you look at as if she were the most precious thing in the world." Francisco sipped the punch, feeling the hot liquid going down his throat and courage rising from his chest. "What should I do? Follow your heart and stop judging people by the surname they carry." The festival continued until late hours, but Francisco barely paid attention to the conversations, the music, the laughter. His eyes remained fixed on Rosa, who circulated among the guests, offering sweets and kind words to everyone. When the last neighbors left and Rosa took Joaum to bed, Francisco remained alone in the yard, contemplating the embers that still pulsed in the bonfire. The sky was clear, sprinkled with stars that shone like diamonds on black velvet. The Southern Cross was drawn high above, pointing the way for those who knew how to follow. "Can't sleep?" Francisco turned. Rosa had returned without her apron, her loose hair falling over her shoulders like a curtain of brown silk. She approached the bonfire and extended her hands to warm them. "The festival was beautiful," Francisco said, searching for words that didn't sound banal. "Joaum had so much fun. I haven't seen him so happy in months." They remained in silence, side by side, listening to the crackling of embers and the song of crickets. Francisco felt Rosa's gentle perfume, something between herb soap and the aroma of flowers she cultivated in the kitchen window. "Rosa," he finally said, turning to look at her, "I need to tell you something." She raised her eyes, large, clear, full of a light that made him forget everything else. "When you arrived here, I hated you before I even met you. I hated you because of your surname, because of the memories I carried, because of the pain your father caused me." Rosa nodded without looking away. "But you—" Francisco ran his hand through his hair, searching for courage. "You showed me I was wrong. You showed me that goodness has no bloodline, that people's hearts aren't inherited like eye color. You saved my son. You saved this house. And you saved me too." "Francisco," Rosa whispered. "I fell in love with you," he said all at once before courage fled. "I fell in love with your goodness, with your strength, with the way you care for Joaum as if he were your own child. I fell in love with who you are, Rosa. Just who you are." Rosa closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were praying. When she opened them, there were tears shining like stars. "I fell in love with you too," she confessed. "With the man I saw beyond the anger. With the devoted father, the respectful son, the fair plantation owner who takes good care of his workers. I fell in love with Francisco Silva, not for what he suffered in the past, but for what he is today." Francisco extended his hand, and Rosa took it without hesitation. They remained like that, holding hands under the starry sky, two wounded souls who found each other in the possibility of true love. "Will you marry me, Rosa dos Santos?" Francisco asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Yes," she replied, her smile illuminating her whole face. "I want to spend the rest of my life by your side." Could it be possible that sometimes destiny transforms the greatest pains into the greatest joys? News of the engagement spread through the region like fire in dry grass. In the shops, in the church squares, on the porches of neighboring plantations, they spoke of nothing else. Francisco Silva, one of the most prosperous plantation owners in the Paraíba Valley, had asked to marry the daughter of the late Sebastião dos Santos, a simple tenant farmer without dowry, without a family name. The first to express his indignation was Colonel Augusto Mendes, owner of the neighboring plantation and Joaum's godfather. "Francisco has lost his mind," he bellowed at Antonio's shop, pounding his fist on the wooden counter. "Marrying some nobody, a overseer's daughter. What example is he setting for the region's children?" The ladies of local society were no less scandalized. Donna Eulalia, wife of the Taubaté judge, organized a committee to talk with Francisco and try to dissuade him from that madness. "My dear," she said, sitting in the plantation's visiting room, her fan fluttering indignantly before her wrinkled face, "I know widowhood is difficult for a man, but that doesn't justify such an imprudent decision. There are girls from good families, educated in convent schools, who would make excellent stepmothers for little João. Francisco listened to everything with forced patience, hands crossed behind his back, jaw tense. When Donna Eulalia finished her sermon, he went to the door and opened it with exaggerated politeness. "Thank you for the visit, Donna Eulalia. Rosa is in the kitchen preparing papaya preserves for the wedding celebration. Would you like to greet her?" The lady left huffing with indignation, her taffeta skirts rustling through the corridor like dry leaves carried by the wind. But the worst was yet to come. Father Damio from the Church of St. Benedict, where Francisco usually attended Sunday masses, flatly refused to perform the ceremony. "I cannot bless a union that will scandalize the entire Christian community," declared the religious man, his round glasses shining with disapproval. "You are a widower of only a few months, and well, everyone knows who her father was." Francisco felt anger rise like high tide, but Rosa, who accompanied him, touched his arm gently. "Reverend," she said with a firm but respectful voice, "I understand your concern, but I believe God sees hearts, not surnames. If our union is blessed by true love and sincere dedication, surely He will approve it." The priest looked at her with surprise. He expected to find a vulgar opportunist, but encountered a woman of dignified bearing and sensible words. "Even so," he insisted, "the scandal—" "Reverend," Francisco interrupted, "Jesus Christ ate at the table of prostitutes and tax collectors. Do you believe He would be bothered by a good woman who cared for a motherless child?" Father Damio didn't know what to answer and maintained his refusal. The hostility of local society reached its peak when Colonel Mendez convinced other plantation owners to boycott Francisco. They stopped buying his coffee, cancelled lease contracts, spread rumors about financial problems at Santa Clara Plantation. "Let him regret marrying that adventuress," the colonel murmured in the ears of whoever would listen. "Soon he'll see that bad blood doesn't change." But Francisco had made his decision and wouldn't back down. On a rainy September afternoon, he saddled his horse and traveled to the neighboring town of Pindamonhangaba, where he found Father Manuel, a young and open-minded religious man who agreed to perform the ceremony. "If the couple truly loves each other and intends to build a Christian family," said the priest with a kind smile, "it will be an honor to celebrate this union." While Francisco organized the wedding, Rosa faced her own battles. The women who used to buy her sweets at church now ostensibly ignored her. The children she taught to read were forbidden by their parents from accepting her lessons. One morning, Rosa found stones thrown at the door of her old house, where she still cared for her sick mother. One of the stones carried a scribbled note, "Get out of here, devil's daughter." Rosa read the message without shedding a tear. She kept it in her skirt pocket and continued to the plantation, where João waited anxiously to learn to make numbers in the improvised notebook. "Rosa," the boy said, noticing her thoughtful expression, "are you sad?" "A little," she admitted. "Sometimes people don't understand when someone wants to be happy in a different way than they imagine." "But you're going to marry Papa anyway," Rosa smiled, the first genuine smile of the day. "Of course. When two people truly love each other, nothing can separate them. Not stones, not mean words, not evil people." João nodded with adult seriousness. "Then I won't be sad because of the mean people. I'll be happy because you're going to be my new mama." Could it be possible that true love was strong enough to overcome all the prejudices and evils of the world? December 15th, 1881, dawned clear and sunny, with that deep blue sky only seen in the São Paulo interior when summer is arriving. At Santa Clara Plantation, preparations for Francisco and Rosa's wedding flowed like river water, silent, constant, and inevitable. Rosa had sewn her own dress, simple white linen but embroidered with tiny flowers she herself had designed, and stitched during the lonely nights of recent months. She had no imported lace veil or satin shoes, but possessed something much more precious, the genuine joy of someone about to unite in love with the man she had chosen as her life companion. Francisco wore his best black cashmere suit, the same one he had worn at his wedding with Clara years before. Donna Maria had insisted he buy new clothes, but he preferred to honor his first wife's memory by maintaining tradition. Clara was not Rosa's rival. She was just a beloved part of his past that deserved respect. João woke before sunrise. Such was his enthusiasm. He would wear long pants and a starched linen shirt for the first time, carrying the rings on a blue velvet cushion that Rosa had embroidered especially for him. "Today you're going to become my real son," Francisco said, adjusting the boy's tie knot. "But I was already your son," João replied, confused. "Yes, you were. But now Rosa will officially become your mother, and when two people who love each other very much get married, everyone around them becomes even more united." João smiled with that simple understanding that only children possess. The ceremony would take place in the plantation's own chapel, a small and simple construction that Francisco had built in the early years of his marriage to Clara. Father Manuel arrived from Pindamonhangaba at dawn, accompanied by two young acolytes who would help him with the Mass. Despite the boycott from local society, some people came to witness the union. The plantation workers came in force. Rosa had won everyone's hearts with her kindness and generosity. Joaquim, the coffee overseer, brought his entire family, including the little daughter Rosa had cured of fever with homemade teas. Donna Maria, radiant in her black silk dress with lace collar, occupied the first chapel bench beside Rosa's mother, a frail lady marked by tuberculosis, but with eyes shining with pride for her daughter. At 3 in the afternoon, when the chapel bell began to ring, Rosa emerged from the big house on Francisco's arm. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, but she didn't need one. The man she had chosen as husband was also the one who would lead her into the future. João walked ahead, stepping firmly and seriously like a little soldier, carrying the rings as if they were the most precious treasure in the world. The ceremony was simple and moving. Father Manuel spoke about love that overcomes adversity, about family formed not only by blood, but by bonds of the heart. Rosa and Francisco exchanged vows that came from the soul. "I promise to love you in all seasons of life," Francisco said, placing the beaten gold ring on Rosa's finger, "in sunny days and stormy ones, in prosperity and difficulties, until death do us part." "I promise to be your faithful companion," Rosa replied, her voice firm despite the tears shining in her eyes. "To care for you, for João, and for all the children God sends us, building a home full of love and peace." When Father Manuel declared them husband and wife, João shouted "Hooray!" with such joy that the entire chapel exploded in laughter and applause. The celebration that followed was modest but warm. Rosa had prepared a banquet with Donna Maria's help: roast suckling pig, rice with pequi, corn farofa, sweets of all kinds. The guests danced to the sound of guitar and accordion until the sky darkened and stars began to twinkle. Francisco and Rosa opened the dancing with a simple waltz, spinning slowly under the crystal chandelier in the visiting room. They weren't experienced dancers, but moved with harmony as if they had rehearsed their whole lives for that moment. "Are you happy, Señora Silva?" Francisco whispered in his wife's ear. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Rosa replied, resting her head on his shoulder. João, watching everything from a high chair, clapped with joy. "Now we're a real family," he shouted, making everyone laugh again. When the celebration ended and the guests left, Francisco, Rosa, and João remained alone on the porch, contemplating the starry night. Santa Clara Plantation breathed peace, as if it had finally found its balance after months of turbulence. "Thank you," Francisco said, holding his wife's hand. "For what?" "For saving my son, for teaching me that love is stronger than hate, for giving me a second chance to be happy." Rosa smiled and kissed his forehead tenderly. "Life gave us a second chance, Francisco, both of us." João yawned sleepily, and Rosa carried him to his room, humming softly the same lullaby she sang in the early days, when he still struggled against longing for the mother who had departed. But now he had a mother again, and Francisco had a wife, and all of them together had a family. Could it be possible that some love stories were truly blessed by heaven? The years that followed the wedding flowed like a gentle and generous river, carrying abundance to every corner of Santa Clara Plantation. The love between Francisco and Rosa deepened like jabuticaba roots, firm, lasting, bearing sweet fruits that nourished the entire family. In June 1882, when winter mornings brought the perfume of blooming coffee, Rosa gave birth to Maria, a girl with brown hair and green eyes like her father's. João, then 9 years old, proved to be an exemplary older brother, helping his mother care for the baby and inventing silly songs that made his little sister giggle. "She's just like Rosa when she smiles," Francisco would say, watching his little daughter in the wooden cradle he had carved himself. "She has the same light in her eyes." 2 years later came Antonio, a robust and clever boy who was born with clenched fists, as if he came into the world ready to conquer it. Rosa laughed when she saw the determination in the red face of her newborn son. "This one will be trouble," she prophesied, kissing the baby's sweaty forehead. And in 1886, when the abolitionist campaign was gaining strength throughout the country, Benedita was born, The youngest, small and delicate like an IPA flower, but with a strong personality that manifested in determined cries and devastating smiles. The plantation's big house transformed into a symphony of children's voices, laughter running through corridors, and the constant sound of Rosa humming while tending to household chores. Francisco watched it all with a heart overflowing with gratitude. At 45, he had a large family, a devoted wife, and the peace of mind he thought lost forever after Clara's death. João grew into a responsible and studious young man. Rosa had taught him to read and write perfectly, and now at 13 he already helped Francisco administer the plantation. He knew all the workers' names, could calculate coffee production in his head, and demonstrated a natural talent for dealing with people. "He'll be a great plantation owner," Francisco would comment proudly, watching João explain to Maria how to plant beans in the garden. "He'll be a great man," Rosa would correct. "Plantation owner is just a profession. A good man is character." Santa Clara. Plantation prospered not only because of favorable soil and climate conditions, but because of the harmony that reigned between employers and workers. Rosa had established an improvised school in the old slave quarters, where she taught the workers' children to read, write, and do basic arithmetic. Francisco provided materials and encouraged education, understanding that educated workers were more productive and happy. "Education is the only inheritance no one can steal," Rosa would tell the children gathered under the shade of the centennial Angico tree growing in the yard. The country's social transformation also reached the plantation. With the Free Womb Law of 1871, there were no more slaves born on the property. Francisco had already freed all the captives he owned, hiring them as salaried workers. The decision generated criticism from neighboring plantation owners, but proved correct. The former slaves, now free and paid, worked with much more dedication. The house lived in constant celebration. The traditional St. John festivities became famous in the region, attracting people from various plantations who came to enjoy Rosa and Francisco's hospitality. Even the neighbors who initially criticized the marriage eventually yielded to the couple's genuine charm and the contagious joy that emanated from Santa Clara plantation. "You have to admit," Colonel Mendez admitted one night, savoring Rosa's famous pachoca, "that woman has blessed hands for everything she does." João turned 15 in 1888, the same year Princess Isabel signed the Golden Law. The coincidence seemed symbolic to Francisco. His son was growing up in a country where all men were free, where the future depended on character and work, not skin color or family origin. "This will be your world," Francisco told João one afternoon as they walked together through the coffee fields. "A world where what matters is what you do, not where you come from." João nodded seriously, understanding the depth of his father's words. At 15, he was already a tall and strong young man with Francisco's dignity and Rosa's kindness shaping his character. The Silva family had become a reference in the region, not only for material prosperity, but for the harmony they radiated, the respectful way they treated everyone, the generosity they showed in difficult times. During the 1891 drought, when many plantations suffered terrible losses and families went hungry, Santa Clara Plantation opened its doors to all who needed help. Rosa organized a solidarity network among the region's women, distributing food and organizing care for orphaned children. "Shared prosperity is multiplied prosperity," she would say, supervising the distribution of basic food baskets to the neediest families. Francisco watched his wife command that mutual aid movement with growing admiration. Rosa had become much more than an exemplary wife and mother. She was a natural leader, respected and loved by all who knew her. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, all 5 children around the jacaranda table, voices mixing in animated conversations about the day's events, Francisco felt deep gratitude filling his chest. He looked at Rosa, who cut homemade bread and distributed slices to each child, and remembered the day she had arrived at the plantation, a 21-year-old young woman, carrying only a small bundle and a heart full of goodness. Who could imagine that a simple soup would be the first step in building a dynasty of love? The year 1901 arrived loaded with changes for Santa Clara Plantation. Francisco, at 58, maintained his erect posture and firm gaze, but Rosa perceived subtle signs that time was beginning to collect its due. Longer delays getting out of bed in the mornings, the need to rest during walks through the coffee fields, trembling hands when signing sales contracts. João, now 28, had become his father's right hand in property administration. He had married Helena, daughter of the neighboring plantation owner, ironically, the same Colonel Mendez who years before had criticized Francisco's marriage to Rosa. Times had changed, prejudices dissolved in the face of years of respectful coexistence, and João had won Helena's heart with the same gentleness Francisco had used to win Rosa's. Maria, at 19, had graduated as a teacher in Taubaté and returned home with diploma in hand and dreams of further modernizing the plantation school. She was a determined young woman, with her mother's sharp intelligence and her father's determination, engaged to a young lawyer who adored her. Antonio, at 17, studied law in São Paulo, sending weekly letters full of enthusiasm about academic debates and the transformations he saw in the capital. He wanted to be a congressman, he said in his letters, to help build a more just Brazil for all. Benedita, at 15, was the family artist. She played piano delicately, painted watercolors that decorated the house walls, and wrote poetry that made Rosa sigh with emotion. She was courted by several young men from the region, but Francisco made a point of saying she would only marry when she found a man who truly deserved her. Santa Clara Plantation had prospered beyond Francisco's most optimistic dreams. It now possessed 5,000 coffee plants, a small processing mill, a school that served 50 children, and a reputation for honesty that extended throughout the Paraíba Valley. But what made Francisco most proud wasn't the material goods. It was the family he had built beside Rosa. 5 educated, respectful children, united by bonds that went far beyond blood. João treated Rosa as a true mother, never forgetting Clara. The other children venerated their older brother as a second father. Dona Maria, at 78, reigned as the respected matriarch of all. "We made it, Rosa," Francisco said one March afternoon, sitting on the porch contemplating the sunset. "We built something beautiful." "We made it," she corrected, taking his calloused hand. "Together." It was on an April morning, when the first autumn rains were beginning to fall over the coffee fields, that the accident happened. Francisco was inspecting the pasture where the Nelore cattle grazed peacefully when Trovão, the plantation's breeding bull, normally a gentle animal, was startled by lightning and charged at him. João, who was accompanying his father, shouted a warning, but it was too late. Francisco managed to dodge the first attack but slipped in the mud and fell. Trovão struck him forcefully in the legs, breaking bones and causing severe wounds. 3 doctors came from Taubaté, but the diagnosis was grim. Francisco would never walk again. His legs were irreversibly damaged, and he would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. "I'd rather have died," Francisco murmured in the first week after the accident, physical pain mixing with despair at seeing himself reduced to an invalid condition. "Don't say that," Rosa scolded firmly, arranging pillows behind her husband's back. "You still have much to live for. You have children to see grow, grandchildren to meet, years of happiness ahead." For 3 years, Rosa cared for Francisco with a nurse's dedication and a passionate wife's tenderness. She learned to massage his paralyzed legs, to prepare home remedies to relieve pain, to adapt the house routine to her husband's needs. Francisco bravely fought against depression and feelings of uselessness. With Rosa and the children's support, he managed to continue administering the plantation from his wheelchair, giving orders, making decisions, maintaining the respectful authority he had always exercised. "You're still the same man," Rosa would say in moments when sadness tried to defeat him. "Just sitting." In January 1904, during a particularly hot afternoon, Francisco called Rosa for a private conversation. He was in his wheelchair, positioned to contemplate the coffee fields he loved so much. "Rosa," he said in a weak but serene voice, "I need to tell you some things." She sat in the chair beside him, taking his hands. "These have been the happiest years of my life. Not the early ones when I was young and strong, but all the years I spent by your side. You taught me that true strength comes from the heart, not from muscles." "Francisco, let me finish," he asked with a tired smile. "When I die." "Don't talk like that." "When I die," he insisted, "I want you to know I'm not afraid. I've had a full life, a wonderful family, true love. Few men can say that." Rosa cried, but they were tears of gratitude mixed with sadness. "You were my salvation, Rosa dos Santos Silva. You came into my life when I needed you most and gave me everything a man could desire: love, family, purpose." Francisco died in his sleep one February dawn in 1904 at age 61. His face was serene, as if he had departed in peace with himself and the world. The wake lasted 3 days, People from 5 neighboring cities came to pay their respects. Colonels, rural workers, merchants, priests, all united by the respect Francisco had earned in life. Could it be possible that some people leave such a great legacy that death becomes merely a passage to immortality? Rosa woke the morning after Francisco's burial with a strange sensation of emptiness and at the same time immense responsibility. At 44, she had become a widow with 4 children still unmarried. João had already married and a plantation to administer. She could have surrendered to mourning and delegated all decisions to her male children, as was common at the time. But Rosa was not a common woman. During the months that followed, she surprised everyone, including her own children, with her leadership capacity. She officially assumed administration of Santa Clara Plantation, personally participating in coffee sales negotiations, supervising fieldwork, making financial decisions with confidence and good sense. "Your father taught me many things during all these years," she explained to João, who had offered to take over the business entirely. "Now it's time to show I learned the lessons well." Rosa implemented changes Francisco had been planning before the accident. She modernized the coffee drying process, built new houses for the workers, expanded the school, and created a medical assistance program for workers and their families. Maria married in 1905 in a joyful ceremony that once again filled the plantation with music and laughter. Rosa insisted the celebration be grand. "Your father loved wedding parties," she would say. "He's certainly watching everything from above and wants to see his daughter well celebrated." Antonio graduated in law in 1907 and returned from the capital with modernizing ideas about agriculture and rural administration. Rosa listened to him attentively, implementing suggestions that made sense and arguing firmly when she disagreed. "You've learned a lot in these years," Antonio commented one day, impressed with the knowledge his mother demonstrated about financial markets. "Your father used to say life is the best school," Rosa replied with a smile, "and I was always a good student." Benedita, the youngest, proved most reluctant to leave the maternal nest. She had fallen in love with a young doctor from Taubaté, but hesitated to marry because she didn't want to leave Rosa alone. "My daughter," Rosa said in a frank conversation, "true love doesn't wait. Marry your doctor and be happy. I'll be fine. But you'll be alone in this big house." "Alone?" Rosa laughed. "With João and Helena living in the new house on the other side of the yard, with Maria coming every week to bring the grandchildren to visit Grandma, with Antonio working here at the plantation. Daughter, I'll be as alone as a hen among her chicks." Benedita married in 1909 at 23, in a ceremony even more beautiful than Maria's. Rosa organized everything personally, from choosing flowers to the banquet menu. During the party, while watching Benedita dance with her husband, Rosa felt a pang of longing for Francisco. How proud he would be to see their youngest daughter so happy, so radiant in her lace dress. "You're thinking of him, aren't you?" Donna Maria whispered, approaching with her well-lived 86 years. "I always think of him," Rosa admitted, "especially at moments like this. He's here with us. I'm sure of it." The 1910s brought grandchildren in abundance. João and Helena gave Rosa 5 children, Maria and her husband 3, Benedita 2 in her first years of marriage. The plantation's big house again echoed with children's laughter, running through corridors, requests for stories and songs. Rosa proved to be an extraordinary grandmother. She knew each grandchild's preferences, remembered all birthdays, invented educational games, and told the same stories that had enchanted Francisco, João, Maria, Antonio, and Benedita years before. "Grandma Rosa," asked Francisco grandson, Maria's son named after his grandfather, "is it true that Grandpa didn't like you when you first met?" "It's true," Rosa replied, rocking the 6-year-old boy in her lap. "Sometimes people need time to see clearly. Your grandfather had wounds in his heart that needed to heal before he could love again." "And how did you heal his wounds?" Rosa smiled, remembering the first soup she had prepared for João, the first smile she had drawn from Francisco, the first moments of trust won drop by drop, with patience, affection, and lots of chicken soup. In 1920, Rosa turned 60, and her children organized a surprise party that gathered more than 100 people at the plantation. People from throughout the region came to honor the woman who had become a reference for wisdom, kindness, and determination in the Paraíba Valley. During her thank you speech, Rosa looked at the crowd gathered in the yard, children, grandchildren, friends, neighbors, plantation workers, and felt her heart overflowing with gratitude. "When I arrived at this plantation almost 40 years ago," she said, "I was a frightened young woman carrying only a small bundle and many hopes. Today I am a fulfilled woman who carries in her heart the certainty of having lived a life with purpose." The applause echoed into the night, mixing with cricket songs and the perfume of flowers Rosa had cultivated for decades in the house garden. Could it be possible that some women were truly blessed with the gift of transforming everything they touch into love and prosperity? The year 1925 arrived loaded with premonitions that Rosa couldn't define, but which hovered over Santa Clara Plantation like clouds before a storm. At 65, she maintained her erect posture and lively gaze, but felt in her body weariness she hadn't known before, a fatigue that didn't come from physical work, but from something deeper, as if her soul was preparing for a long journey. João, now 42 and father of 6 children, had gradually assumed more responsibilities at the plantation, always respecting his mother's decisions, but relieving her of the heaviest burdens. Maria, at 43, had become one of the region's most respected educators, directing a school that served children from 5 neighboring plantations. Antonio prospered as a lawyer in Taubaté, but came every week to visit his mother and handle the property's legal affairs. Benedita, at 39, had moved to the capital with her doctor husband, but whenever possible returned to the plantation with her 2 children to ease family longing. Santa Clara Plantation was at the height of prosperity. The coffee fields stretched green and lush across the hills, the new processing house handled the region's best coffee, and the Silva family's reputation for honesty spread throughout the Paraíba Valley. But Rosa knew that material prosperity means little if not accompanied by prosperity of the heart. In May, when preparations for the traditional St. John festival began, Rosa surprised everyone by announcing she would personally organize every detail. "But Mother," Maria protested, "you've done this so many times. Why not let the granddaughters help?" "Because," Rosa replied with a mysterious smile, "some things need to be done by hands that carry tradition in the soul." For weeks, Rosa worked with renewed dedication. She personally chose ingredients for sweets, supervised woodcutting for the bonfire, embroidered new flags to decorate the yard. She seemed driven by an urgency no one could understand. On St. John's Eve, while checking the decoration's final details, Rosa stopped before Francisco's portrait that occupied a place of honor in the visiting room. The photograph, taken a few years before the accident, showed a 55-year-old man at maturity's peak with a serene gaze and dignified posture. "Tomorrow will be special, my dear," she whispered to the image. "You can be sure." The 1925 St. John Festival surpassed all previous ones. People came from 7 different cities to participate in the celebration at Santa Clara Plantation. The yard became small for so many people, and Rosa circulated among guests with energy that surprised everyone. During the night, when the bonfire crackled high and accordions played animated fandangos, Rosa gathered all her grandchildren around her to tell the story that had become family tradition. "Once upon a time," she began, her melodious voice cutting through the conversation noise, "there was a very sad boy who couldn't eat because he had lost his beloved mother. 12 grandchildren, aged between 4 and 18, listened in religious silence as their grandmother narrated the story of João Francisco and the soup that changed an entire family's destiny." "And what was the secret of Grandma Rosa's soup?" asked little Clara, Benedita's daughter, only 5 years old, asking the question that always ended the narrative. "The secret," Rosa said, kissing the little girl's forehead, "was that the soup was made with prayer and seasoned with lots and lots of love." After the festival, when the last guests left and the family retired to sleep, Rosa remained alone in the kitchen, exactly like that first night 44 years ago, when she had prepared the soup that saved João. She took the little notebook where she wrote her recipes, the same one she had brought in her small bundle when she arrived at the plantation, and wrote in careful handwriting, "For whoever wants to make the soup that heals broken hearts, plump free-range chicken, onion and garlic sautéed with love, clean well water, salt in the right measure, rice grains, basil and mint from the yard. But the main ingredient can't be bought anywhere. It's the love of whoever cooks for whoever will eat. Without this special seasoning, the soup is just food. With it, it's medicine for the soul." She closed the notebook and left it on the table, where someone would surely find it. She went up to the bedroom, the same one she had shared with Francisco for more than 20 years, and lay down peacefully. Through the open window, she could see the bonfire embers still twinkling in the yard, and hear the nocturnal song of crickets. "It was a beautiful festival, wasn't it, Francisco?" she whispered to the empty pillow beside her. "Our children are well. Our grandchildren are healthy and educated. The plantation prospers. We did good work, my dear." Rosa slept peacefully and didn't wake up again. She departed during sleep. On the same day she had arrived at the plantation 44 years before, June 24th, St. John's Day. Maria found her the next morning, with a peaceful expression and hands crossed over her chest, as if she were just resting after an especially beautiful festival. Rosa's wake lasted 3 days and attracted people from the entire region. Workers, plantation owners, merchants, authorities, all came to pay homage to the woman who had become a legend in life. João, now orphaned for the second time, spoke on behalf of the family. "Our mother Rosa arrived here as a cook and departed as a blessing. She taught us that goodness isn't inherited, it's earned every day. That family isn't just blood, it's also choice. That true love has the power to heal any wound and overcome any obstacle. Could it be possible that some people are sent by God to fulfill specific missions on earth?" St. Benedict Cemetery, Taubaté, morning of June 27th, 1926. Under the shade of a centennial silk floss tree, 2 white marble headstones reflected the first rays of sun piercing through the morning mist. The first, older, bore an inscription carved with care. Francisco Silva, 1843-1904, devoted husband, loving father, man of honor. The second, still with fresh flowers deposited by loving hands, completed the story. Rosa dos Santos Silva, 1860-1926, arrived as a cook, remained as a mother, departed as a blessing. Her soup healed hearts, and her goodness built a dynasty. João Silva, now 43 and family patriarch, visited his parents' graves every Sunday morning after Mass. On that special day he wasn't alone. His children, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, and 12 grandchildren formed a respectful semicircle around the graves. "Grandpa Francisco and Grandma Rosa," said little Clara, 6 years old, placing a bouquet of daisies on Rosa's headstone. "I brought flowers from the garden you planted, and I brought drawings I made at Grandma Maria's school," added Francisco grandson, now a 21-year-old young man studying medicine in São Paulo. João watched the scene with a heart full of gratitude and pride. In 20 years of marriage, Francisco and Rosa had built something that transcended death, a family united by solid values, a prosperous plantation administered with honesty, a legacy of goodness perpetuated through generations. Santa Clara Plantation continued being a regional reference. Under João's administration, with Antonio's guidance and Maria's educational supervision, the property had modernized without losing its essence. It now possessed a small processing mill, a producers' cooperative serving neighboring plantations, and a rural school that was a model for the entire Paraíba Valley. "Father," João said, addressing Francisco's grave, "this year's harvest was the best of all time. And Mother," he turned to Rosa's headstone, "all the grandchildren can read and write. You would be proud." The St. John festival tradition remained unchanged. So every year, on the date that marked Rosa's arrival at the plantation, and also her departure, the family organized a celebration that gathered hundreds of people. Rosa's grandchildren prepared the same recipes she had created, told stories they heard from her, perpetuated customs that transformed the plantation into a symbol of hospitality and family unity. During the 1940 St. John Festival, when João turned 57 and was grandfather to 23 great-grandchildren, he decided to do something special. He had a small museum built in the old slave quarters, where Rosa had slept during her first months at the plantation. The Silva Family Museum preserved objects, photographs, documents, and mainly the recipe notebook where Rosa had written her culinary creations. The page with the soup that heals broken hearts recipe was protected by glass and visited by people from throughout the region. Her recipes became family patrimony, João told visitors who came to learn the story. But the most important recipe, that of love that overcomes differences, that she engraved in our hearts. Maria, at 58, had become one of São Paulo State's most respected educators. She directed a network of rural schools, following the model Rosa had created at the plantation. She never married, dedicating her entire life to educating poor children in the region. "My mother used to say, 'Education is the only inheritance no one can steal,'" Maria would repeat to her students. "That's why you must study as if you were planting seeds for the future." Antonio became a judge in Taubaté, known for incorruptible honesty and special attention to cases involving needy families. He married late at 35, but built a solid and happy family, following his parents' example. "Justice without compassion is just legalism," he would say in court. "I learned from my mother that laws should serve people, not the other way around." Benedita moved permanently to São Paulo after Rosa's death, where her husband established a medical clinic that served poor families free of charge. She had 4 children who grew up hearing stories about the plantation, about Grandma Rosa, and about the importance of helping those in need. Grandma Rosa used to say, "Shared prosperity is multiplied prosperity," Benedita would teach her children. "That's why Daddy doesn't charge people who have no money." In 1950, when João turned 67, he decided to write a book telling the family story. He titled it Grandma Rosa's Soup and distributed it free to regional schools. The book became so popular, it was adopted as required reading in dozens of São Paulo interior municipalities. Teachers used the story to teach values like tolerance, forgiveness, family, and persistence. "It's a true story," João would explain in school lectures, about how true love can transform hate into affection, prejudice into respect, sadness into joy. In 1960, Santa Clara Plantation was declared Cultural Historic Heritage of the Paraíba Valley. The big house became a museum, but continued being inhabited by Francisco and Rosa's descendants. The family decision was unanimous. The plantation should remain alive, not just preserved. "Living museum," defined Francisco, great-grandson, a history graduate from the University of São Paulo and specialist in historic preservation, a place where past and present coexist harmoniously. Rosa's soup recipe was reproduced in regional cookbooks and spread throughout Brazil. Mothers told children the story of the soup that saved a family, adapting details but preserving the essence, the power of love demonstrated through simple gestures. In 1981, when 100 years of Rosa's arrival at the plantation were completed, the family organized a special celebration. More than 500 descendants of Francisco and Rosa gathered at the property, coming from every corner of Brazil. João, at 98, and respected patriarch of a family that included doctors, lawyers, teachers, engineers, and even a republic senator, gave an emotional speech. 100 years ago, a 21-year-old girl arrived at this plantation carrying only a small bundle and a heart full of goodness. Today we are more than 500 people who owe our existence to the love that was born between her and my father. Rosa dos Santos Silva wasn't just our family's matriarch. She was a living lesson that true love multiplies blessings. When João died in 1985 at 102, he was buried beside the parents who raised him. His headstone bore a phrase he himself had chosen: João Silva, 1873-1985, beloved son of Francisco and Rosa, devoted father, guardian of family tradition. Santa Clara Plantation continues prosperous and inhabited by Rosa and Francisco's descendants. The school still operates, the St. John Festival continues as a centennial tradition, and the soup recipe continues being transmitted from generation to generation. At the property entrance, a bronze plaque summarizes the story. Santa Clara Plantation, founded in 1875 by Francisco Silva, transformed by Rosa dos Santos Silva's love from 1881. Home of a family that proves daily that true love can overcome any obstacle and that goodness is the most valuable inheritance one can leave to future generations. And every morning when the sun rises over the Paraíba Valley coffee fields, the perfume of basil and mint still scents the garden where Rosa taught João to plant. The family children still play in the same yard where she told Saci Pererê stories. And in the big house kitchen, someone is always preparing soup with the special seasoning no recipe can teach, the love of whoever cooks for whoever will eat. Rosa dos Santos Silva's story proves some people are born to be blessings in others' lives. That true love has the power to heal wounds, build bridges, and create legacies that cross generations. That a simple soup, prepared with care by kind hands, can truly save an entire family. And that some love stories are so beautiful, they deserve to be told forever.